Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing another episode of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making, and compare them to their real-life fossil counterparts. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment. We've got quite a few sauropods today. I know we all love our sauropods. Definitely a really cool group of animals, but we've got quite a few herbivores. We've got a Stegosaur, we've got a couple remasters of some like iguanodontians and things like that. We've also got a fish, and we've got a theropod, and we've also got a mammal that you probably saw on the tin, you know, the really cool mammal. So let's get stuck into it. We're not going to be messing around too much. We have got Iguana Colossus by Netraptor and Castle Cog. These are wonderful guys. We'll let them walk out a little bit. We'll have a look at you because you looked in a nice position there. Look at that. There we are. Look at this guy. This is Iguana Colossus. So Iguana Colossus, which means Iguana Colossus or Colossal Iguana, funny enough, is a species of iguanodontian ornithopod from North America that lived during the early Cretaceous. To get into that, but the holotype itself was discovered by Donald de Belux in 2005 and was unearthed from the Yellow Cat member from the Cedar Mountain Formation in Utah, and this dates back to the early Cretaceous, about I think it's what's called the Valagurian stage, so about 139 to 134 million years ago is what it's typically found. But it wasn't named and described until 2010, with a bunch of paleontologists, including, Kirkland and Donald himself, and a few other paleontologists all kind of joined together to describe this genus, but along with the genus Hippodraco from the Cedar Mountain Formation. And it's this individual's kind of known from a single individual, including skull elements, and also other fragmentary remains. So it is actually quite well known. So there's bits of skull. I think you find the scapula, some vertebrae from the neck and tail and body, ischium and puba, I think as well, the pubis and the ischium. So it is fairly well known compared to most of the dinosaurs. So its scientific name or generic name kind of means iguana, because its teeth look like a bunch of iguana, hence the term like iguanodontian. So it looks a little bit like an iguana in its teeth. And Colossus because of its pretty large size. That's kind of what it was also known from. And its other name is Fortis, which is quite cool. But in terms of its kind of anatomy and things like that, this was actually considered quite a large, robust iguanodontian, reaching about 9 meters or 30 feet in length and weighing about 5 tons. So definitely putting the Colossus in colossal, the colossal in Colossus. And according to its colleagues, they did have some little things that were different to them. That kind of distinguish it from other iguanodontians to kind of prove that point. It actually had quite a stocky metatarsus and a prominent left fibula that measured about 63 centimeters long. And based on comparisons of Camptosaurus and Dacododon, all these traits are kind of like a mix of those later animals, things like Iguanodon, and later things like that, and then you have mixed traits of things like Camptosaurus and those early relatives. So it's definitely like on the pathway of becoming a little bit more advanced. So it's kind of like a cool in between. That's cool as well. But Iguana Colossus itself is placed in the genus was placed within Iguanodontia, not the genus, the family, which is being a Styracosternon, which is a basal subgroup of hadrosaurs that are actually more closely related to hadrosaurids. So your true hadrosaurs, like Edmontosaurus and Parasaurolophus, rather than Camptosaurids like Camptosaurus and animals like that, and Lintodon potentially. And that's where they kind of believe they're kind of like they're in between, so they're related-ish to Iguanodon, but not very closely. But in terms of where this guy was found, Iguana Colossus was recovered from the Yellow Cat member in the Cedar Mountain Formation. However, it is divided into the upper and lower cat member, so there are animals that are from the upper that are in the lower and vice versa. So these guys were found in the lower beds, and it shared its habitat with animals like Phallocurus, which is a Therizinosaur, Gemenoraptor, and Yogovichia. Also the sauropod Monerosaurus and the turtle Neomichelles, and also some gophophonids, so it is quite a rich habitat with lots of life in it. And the other member from the upper cat is kind of some animals that are probably more famous than you'll know. As soon as I mention some names, you'll probably recognize them. Things like Stegosaurus and Moabosaurus, Iguanodontians, Certicurus and Hippodraco, Martharaptor and Utahraptor, also Gostonia was also found there, and a few other turtle and fish fossils. So it was quite a rich habitat, definitely. So really, really cool to see this guy here. And just before I get started on the next guy, I really do like how Netraptor really gave us some really interesting kind of textures, not just a flat texture, but you can see it's got the wrinkles, but also these larger scales that I think really fit the Iguana Colossus quite well. So yeah, really, really nice. Definitely a big fan of this guy. How can you not love it? So let him run off and do his thing. Let him run off so they can make it out of there. So next up we have got Dacentrurus, which was done by Hasquak Tree, who has a very sordid history with the species. It's a very interesting animal we'll get into. But yeah, here is Dacentrurus. So very, very cool species here. We'll give them a little looky-loo. And it does the classic bark, of course. That's better. So let's have a look at these guys. Let's see who we can get a good look at. We'll have a look at you, because, no, you're kind of in a weird position. We'll keep on moving. They always kind of mold into each other. Well, yeah, you're looking a bit of posse. So here is Dacentrurus. So Dacentrurus, its name means tail full of points, but it was originally known as Omosaurus. These guys are a genus of Stegosaurian from the late Cretaceous, and maybe, the late Jurassic, but maybe the early Cretaceous, between 154 to 140 million years ago, from Europe. So this guy was first described was first found in the 23rd of May, 1874. James Stopland of the Swindon Brick and Tile Company actually gave this to Richard Owen, who was quite a renowned, coined the term Dinosaur. And in their clay pit in Swindon Quarry between the Old Swindon Hill and Wiltshire, and then was donated to the British Museum of Natural History. And then they sent them on to William Davies to secure the specimen and have a look at that. And Owen originally described the remains in 1875 as Omosaurus amturus, with a generic name coming from the name upper arm because it had quite a robust humerus, and armorus means armed, so in case it had a large spike that Owen thought it was actually quite present on the upper arm, as we'll kind of get through there. The holotype itself is found in the layer of Cambrian clay formation dated to late Cambrian, so the late Jurassic. The pits were soon abandoned, and it's not possible to really determine their exact location and date, but it is postcranial and has quite a bit of material referred to it. And there's been several other species within a genus named, but all were kind of lumped back into this one species. There was in one Lexosaurus, which was considered its own genus. Omosaurus philippsini was described a young individual. Then on Grant Phillips, and then it was considered Nomendubium. So it's got a very assorted history. But even the last two, even as the last two Omosaurus was named, it actually became that the name Omosaurus was actually preoccupied by a crocodilian at the time, but it was actually a phytosaur, so a really weird group of Jurassic archosaurs. So because of that, they had to be renamed, and it was actually suggested they just put the name under Stegosaurus. And then it was renamed the genus to Dacentrurus, which means very pointy tail, as makes sense, because it looks like it's got a very pointy tail. And yeah, it's one of those got very complex, different taxonomy. I could go on to it about forever, but it's actually, there's a little bit of taxonomy we'll get into, but we'll carry on. So its distribution, it actually is one of the best known stegosaur species from Europe, and it's actually and it was first known from articulated remains. A lot of it was referred to Dacentrurus, and there's quite a few around the place. Found the Lochrena Formation, Kimmeridge Clay, all across Europe as well. There's even potentially an egg that has been assigned to Dacentrurus, which is actually the first of any Stegosaur, which is quite cool. But in terms of description, this is actually quite large for Stegosaur. It's actually quite up there, comparable with Stegosaurus, with some specimens reaching about 8 to 9 meters or 26 to 30 feet, at about 1.8 meters or 5 feet 9 at the hip, and about 5 to 7 metric tons. So for a Stegosaur, its gut was actually considered broad with a massive rump, and also indicated, which is also indicated by extremely wide dorsal vertebrae and dorsal centra and things like that. And then there's a lot of other stuff that you kind of look into it. It's a very robust animal, more so than any known Stegosaur known in 1985. So it's a very robust animal, along with Stegosaurus. And also, as I mentioned, Omosaurus, which means big humerus. It does have quite a large humerus that suggests some powerful musculature. And this trait is shared with the majority of derived Stegosaurs. However, it's an exceptional trait in this species. So it's more basal bone compared is much lower than that of Stegosaurus. So it's kind of very interesting in that as well. And in armor as well, it has pretty much the same generalized proportions as Stegosaurus. Its plate and spike configuration is actually rather different. So how it kind of worked, you can see on the specimen here. You can see it's got lots of little plates going down its neck, and then it kind of a lot more spiky rather than the big and wide plates of Stegosaurus. And then it kind of transitions into these spikes going down the tail. And the holotype specimen shows they have small, blunt, asymmetrical neck and front back plates, and these were 15 centimeters long. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Anyway, we'll carry on. But you can see it kind of transitions as they get longer and longer down the back, and then turn into kind of those spikes there. And actually, there was originally kind of suggested that it had a shoulder spike similar to Hentrosaurus, but we don't know that much yet. But it seems they were most of the time placed on the tail. As well, but the shoulder spike is considered unlikely these days. So these guys were the first Stegosaur with real good remains that were discovered. Earlier finds include Perenothodon, Counterparts, and Rajasaurus, but they were too limited to really give like a good name to the group or anything. By 1957, it was thought that Dacentrurus was more derived than Electrosaurus, but they actually suggest they're kind of an early offshoot of the tree. But you consider who they're related to. At the moment, the most recent kind of phylogeny suggests they are in Stegosauridae, so their closest relatives are things like Miragaia and Stegosaurus itself, so it is considered quite late, so it's quite an later Stegosaur, and consequently makes sense as being one of the biggest, so it's a sister group to the Stegosaurs, interestingly. And there is some evidence that just that Miragaia may actually be a species of Dacentrurus. It's kind of debated, but it could potentially be the same thing, which is a little bit sad, but they are very, very cool. They do share with others in the group, like Miragaia, these large horns as well, these large auricurrent horns that have powerful muscles. That means their forelimbs could be firmly anchored to the ground while they swing their tail to defend themselves from predators, or potentially each other. So things like Torvosaurus as well. So that would have been to defend themselves, but also potentially, against each other. I think we greatly underestimate sexual selection in dinosaurs and a lot of these fancy, things. They probably just whacked each other, perhaps more than they would with predators. If you look at like all kind of antelopes and animals today, they tend to use them more on each other than they use predators. But yeah, really, really cool. Another cool species. So Haswalk Tree really did a really great job with this one. I also like that it's not quite as saturated as his former mods, so really awesome job to work a little bit on that. Definitely an awesome mod, definitely a big fan. So next up we've got a sauropod. As I mentioned, we've got some sauropods. We've got Sonorasaurus. So here's another cool one here. This was done by Jojo Chess, so let's have a look at what Jojo Chess has done. So here he is. This is Sonorasaurus. Let's have a look at you. Got this nice one here. So this is Sonorasaurus. So Sonosaurus is a genus of brachiosaurid dinosaur from the early to late Cretaceous, so between 112 to 193 million years ago, or the Albion-Cenomanian. So these guys are a sauropod that was found in southern Arizona in the US, and the name means Sonora lizard from the Sonora River, which flows into the Sonora Desert. And its type species is Thompsoni, which was described in 1988 by Rakovich. So the fossilized remains were first found in November 1994 by geology student Richard Thompson in the Tuni Ranch Formation in the Whetstone Mountains, in the Chihuahua Desert, in the Sonoran Desert as well. And then it was a relatively complete skeleton, which was quite interesting, and he informed paleontologist Ronald Paul Rakovich in the Arizona Sonoran Desert Museum in Tucson of the find. It was originally thought to be a stegosaur. I mean, not a stegosaur, there is a dinosaur. Based on the mistaken table ship born for a hand claw, and then they were found. It was originally going to be in Sonorasaurus, but there was a nomenubium. Both men asked dinosaur expert Edwin Harris Colbert to identify the animal, and based on pictures, he identified it as a hadrosaurid. And then they kind of went through and actually found. They actually would consider it naming Chihuahuasaurus as they would find it comical to compare a gigantic sauropod to a minuscule dog breed, and then a subsequent article tried to find the bones and identify it as a hadrosaurid Cretasaurus, but then they actually found out it was definitely a sauropod, and it was finally described in 1998, who described it as a brachiosaurid sauropod, and actually was considered the early known brachiosaur to live in the Middle Cretaceous, and in 2018 it was actually declared the state dinosaur of Arizona, so that's quite cool. So in terms of its description, Sonorasaurus is incomplete, but has various kind of postcranial elements, many of which are fragmentary. A complete dorsal rib forms of the horizon as well. And is estimated to be about 15 meters long, or about 49 feet long, 8 meters tall, and weighed about 10 tons. So it's not nearly as big as Brachiosaurus, it's probably about a third the size, but it is believed to be related to Brachiosaurus and Giraffatitan. It's actually believed to be its closest relative is Giraffatitan, so that's quite interesting. But it's still considered a brachiosaurid. Another really cool species that we get to talk about. We'll let them run off and do their thing, because why not? The sauropods being sauropods. Hopefully they don't block the way too much, as they do. Let them walk off and do their thing. So next up, oh no, they're going to hang around over there. They're going to do their thing. I knew it. See, I know. They're going to do it. They basically just did a turnaround just to do it. Of course they would. Bloody cute though. Very, very cute. So let them run off and do their thing. Let them do their thing. I don't know why they're all hanging up here at the moment. They tend to do that. Right, so next up we've got by Netraptor again. I'm going to come back to them sporadically through this episode because they created some very interesting animals. We've got here Isosaurus. Here we are, there's Isosaurus. Definitely not getting in the way of everyone this time. Let's have a look at you. Very, very pretty. Let's see if we can get you in a good angle. There we are, perfect. Okay, so let's have a look at Isosaurus. So Isosaurus is a very, very cool species. So this is a genus of Titanosaurian dinosaur, Titanosaur, from the late Cretaceous Lamenta Formation of India and also the Pab Formation of Pakistan. and is known the only species in this genus is Isosaurus colbalti. So the type specimen itself was originally described as Titanosaurus colbalti by Sohan Lanjan and Soswiski Belapodhaloi. I probably butchered that in 1997. The specific name on is Edwin Harris Colbert. In 2003, the fossils were actually distinguished as being their own genus, and it was named Isosaurus as a reference to the Indian Statistical Institute, which is the ISI, so Isosaurus, which means lizard, and it's quite an interesting animal. It has, short, vertically directed neck and long forelimbs, which makes it look quite different compared to other sauropods. The site locality is in Dronagon Hill, which is from the Maastrichtian, in the Lamenta Formation of India, Canada. But a brain case referable to the species is also known in Pakistan, and is actually quite well known from better remains than many other titanosaurs that were known at the time of description, and much of the postcrania is actually known quite well. So it is pretty well known. There's no skull, highland, or forelimb bones known. Pretty much everything else is kind of known, and it's considered and kind of one of the more complete ones. So in terms of sauropod size, this guy was considered medium, so still a decent size, but not overly huge like Pagona Titan and Argentinosaurus and those guys. These guys got to about 18 meters long, or about 59 feet, and weighed about 15 tons, or 17 short tons. And there is some little things about its relative that lived with Dinosaurus different to kind of distinguish them. And the cranium of Isosaurus actually just looked a lot like Diplodocus or Apatosaurus in a lot of ways, but the bone modification is different, so that's quite interesting there. So in terms of Isosaurus, it was considered to be consistently being considered a titanosaurian sauropod. It's kind of its relationships within that group has kind of gone around. Most analyses suggest it's closely related to Rapidosaurus and Altosaltosaurids, but it kind of goes all over the place. The most recent one was suggested as related to Acabar and Rapidosaurus and animals like that, which makes sense. In terms of paleobiology, though, fungus and coprolites that have been voided by Isosaurus suggested they ate several types of tree, but also fungi, since these fungi are known to be pathogens that infect tree leaves, so they definitely were browsers. And today they live in an area now belonging to India during the Maastrichtian of the Cretaceous, and at this time they actually would have pretty much been an island at the time, or an isolated continent. And its remains are the most complete among the dinosaurs of that region. And Wilson et al. In 2009 listed only 2 titanian sauropods, Isosaurus and the distinct relative Dinosaurus. And there are other dinosaurs known from this formation, like actually quite a few Albertosaurs, like Rajasaurus, which we'll be getting into soon, is one of the animals that lived with it. If you've seen Prehistoric Planet, you'll kind of know this guy. And this guy was featured in Prehistoric Planet as well. So another really cool species. We're going to let you run off and do your thing, of course. Always. Got to let you do that. So next up, we've got our last sauropod. This is done by Jasurba, who has always been a bit creative and funky with their mods. So we'll have a look at this one. This is Antarctosaurus. Another cool one here. So this is Antarctosaurus. Let's see if we can get him to pose a little bit better for us. So he's looking over there. There we are. Look at this beautiful guy. So this is Antarctosaurus, which means southern lizard. So these guys are a genus of titanosaurian sauropod from the late Cretaceous of what is South America, so probably about 83 million years ago. The type species is Antarctosaurus womanaensis, and there's a second species, Antarctosaurus giganteus, were both described by prolific German paleontologist Friedrich von Huene in 1929, and 3 additional species have been named, but later studies have actually considered them dubious or unlikely to pertain to the genus. And even the type species itself is controversial because there's uncertainty of whether all of the described remains belong to the same individual, or even the same genus of dinosaur. And the second species is also considered dubious, but this fragmentary remains may actually represent one of the largest dinosaurs known. So as mentioned, they were first mentioned in print in 1916, but then were described in 1929 as Antarctosaurus. And their name does not actually refer to Antarctica. They were not found in Antarctica. They were found in Argentina. But Antarctic means kind of basically just means southern lizard. So it's basically anti-north, which is south. So it's kind of where it's got its name from. And the type species itself was found, as I mentioned, the type species of the genus in the Enchilada Formation in Argentina and from the early Campanian. And two additional limb bones were found in the Chubut province in 1924, but actually it's doubted they referred to them as well. The fragmentary second species is Antarcticus giganteus, which was also found in the Chubut province in Argentina. It's from a little bit earlier, I believe, from the Canadian Santonian stage, and likely the plotter is likely the younger Alberto. Very rare remains of none of the species, as mentioned, is regarded as a nomen dubium. So it's one of those, it's always kind of, up in the air with this one. It's a taxonomic nightmare. Describing Antarctosaurus is quite interesting. The species it's probably going to be referred to as giganteus. It is known from one kind of left and right femur, a partial left and right pubis, and a distal end of a damaged tibia, with a gigantic femur that was about 7 feet long. So that shows it was quite large. And it was considered similar in size to Giraffa-Titan and Brachiosaurus, which was considered large at the time. Estimates suggest it was actually potentially this was a rival Argentinosaurus, getting about 80 to 100 tons and about 30 to 35 meters. But even more recent estimates kind of give it weights between 33 meters and about 65 tons. So it is still quite a large animal, even by today's estimates, trying to bring them down. The most recent is about 30 meters long, about 45 tons. But because it's only known from a couple femurs, there's a lot of error in there as well. But in terms of classification, it is a Lithosaurian, so it is related to Dinosaurus and things like that. It's not quite related to Argentinosaurus, but getting there. But yeah, I'm going to say as well, I like that it's a dubious genus, so you can do what you want with it, but I like the feathers, There's been some art of sauropods with feathers, and I do quite like it, keeps it cold in the Arctic, in the cold weather. But I also just quite like giving a sauropod feathers, and I think it looks quite good. And, feathers may be ancestral to all dinosaurs, so, maybe we did have some feathered sauropods, and I think that would be a cool thing to imagine, but as unlikely it is, but I like Usurper just doing funky things. Nice to see some funky things. So yeah, we're going to let them run off and do its thing. Next up, we've got a fish. As I mentioned, we love fish. We've got Dango, who's a really, really cool little guy, so let's have a release of this one. There's a funky little guy, there's Dango. Let the bang go. Look at this little guy. Let's have a look at you. There we are. So, Dango, named after Manu Dango, is a genus of pecomorph teleost fish from the late Egyptian, I believe it's from the Miocene, but not Pliocene, so between 50 and 49 million years ago, so like the Paleogene, from Italy. And the type and only species is Dango volans, and is actually known from 2 very complete and well-preserved specimens. And it was originally identified in the 18th century by Giovanni Stefano Volta, and was actually previously known as well as Pegasus volans, but Pegasus volans itself, it had to be renamed because Pegasus volans is actually used by another animal. So you can't have 2 things named the same thing, so this one had to be changed because the other one was older. So Dango is known from 2 specimens that were originally referred to as I mentioned Pegasus volans by Volenta in 1796. The holotype itself is a partially complete articulated skeleton, lacking the posterior portion of the body, and the only other referred specimen consists of the same parts, but preserves less of the postcrania compared to the holotype, with the preservation tail being cut off earlier. So, Dango is notable. It is quite bizarre. It has an extremely elongated body, a highly reduced abdominal region, and enlarged dorsal pelvic anal fins. and the elongated pelvic fins were attached to an external gut located just below the head, similar to that of certain larval teleosts. So unique morphology is very interesting. So this fish seems to look like the larva of many different species of ray fin fish, but the level of ossification, so the level of calcium in their bones, suggests that this was an adult. So it's basically a highly pedomorphic fish, or basically an adult fish that looks a lot like a baby fish. So basically, instead of growing up into your typical adult forms, they just stop the growth and then they mature. So they basically look like a baby fish. Humans are a great example. If you look at the head of a baby chimp, it looks very similar to a human, and then you can see it bulks up to the adult chimpanzee. So you can see humans are very pedomorphic because we have smaller jaws, we have very baby-like features. So this is another extreme example of that. Basically, it's a baby of another species, but what happened is they stopped growing and stopped developing, and then they started breeding. So they just kind of reverted back and keep those baby-like traits into adulthood. So the adults have a larval-like appearance. So that's quite interesting. The generic name Dango honors Cameroon musician and songwriter Manu Dibango, and volans means flying or moving swiftly. And as I mentioned before, the taxon was first described by Valita in 1796 as Pegasus volans, but 30 years prior, Linnaeus actually used Pegasus volans as a kind of sea moth, and then later turned out to be a different synonym of a different species. So Pegasus volans considered to be used in basically literature until various authors, and then it was 2025. It was actually finally hatched and renamed into Dango volans. So that's quite cool. So yeah, another cool little species here. Definitely nice to see some very funky little animals. So basically an adult baby fish. So it's quite cool there. So I'll let you run off and do your thing. Next up, we've got only a couple more left. We have got Rajasaurus. So this one is done by NetRaptor, and Jasuba did the Dango as well. Another really cool one there. So NetRaptor, we've got the Rajasaurus. Let's see, and it does it again. Love it when you do that. Okay. So this is, we'll have a look at you, because you look like the nicest to me. So this is Rajasaurus. So Rajasaurus means king lizard, is a genus of carnivorous Albertosaurian theropod from the late Cretaceous of India, living in the Maastrichtian, same time and place as Isosaurus, from the Lamenta Formation in the Gujarat state of Western India, inhabiting what is now the Narmada River Valley. So in terms of its naming, it was first discovered in 1981 by geologists working for the Geological Society of India, after being given limestone structures later recognized as dinosaur eggs, which is very interesting. The remains of Rajasaurus were found in these fossil-rich limestone beds, in which the geologist of the time, Sonorasaurus, I don't know how you say that, attempted to excavate it two separate trips in between 1982 and 1983, and 1983 and 1984. Teaming up with the American Institute of Indian Studies and the National Geographic Society, they actually managed to find it and bring it out. So the holotype itself is from partial skeleton, which includes the maxilla, premaxilla, brain case, the quadrate, bits of hip, and postcranial remains as well, and is the first Indian theropod that has preserved these postcranial remains. And it's possible that Rajasaurus, Lamentasaurus, and Indosaurus are actually synonymous, but it cannot be confirmed due to fragmentary remains and Lamentasaurus being lost to history. So generic name kind of means in Sanskrit as king or chief, or best of its kind in ancient Greek as well, and lizard, being lizard in Greek. But in terms of its description, in 2010, paleontologist Gregory S. Paul estimated a body length of Rajasaurus at 11 meters and about 4 tons, which was mostly way too large. But in 2016, it was estimated to be about 6 meters, 6.6 meters, and which puts it with known vertebrae being significantly smaller than those of Carnotaurus and Majungasaurus as well, and actually seemed to look a lot like Majungasaurus, because remember that Madagascar and India were connected and then split apart, so it makes sense that its relatives would be Majungasaurus. It had the typical 4 fingers, short arms, and heavy built skull of most abelisaurs, and its skull was quite short, but had modest jaw musculature and short teeth. It had a bite force similar to Allosaurus, potentially, as well. So, yeah, the kind of typical traits for an Abelisaur. It's not too different in that regard. In terms of who related to, it's related to Majungasaurus. That's its kind of sister species, is Majungasaurus, but also related to Indosaurus and Acrovenator as well. But in terms of paleobiology, it was believed it had, you can see the horns there, similar to a Majungasaurus, could have been used for display or headbutting with other individuals, and actually headbutting inferred from the lack of callous bone on the skull has both suggested they may have had shoving matches like modern day marine iguanas, or focus on fighting on the neck like giraffes do. And they may have been ambush predators using the bite and hold tactic to hunt large prey, and the leg bones were actually comparatively short compared to similarly sized theropods. So very similar to Majungasaurus, probably a little bit more shorter legs and things like that, which is quite cool. But yeah, in terms of its relations, as I mentioned, where it was found in the Lamenta Formation from the Maastrichtian, so right at the end of the Cretaceous, and that area would have had the Deccan Traps, which was a very large group of volcanoes, and it mentioned sauropods like Isosaurus would have been hanging around there. So lots of different species of plants there, very rich in, because volcanic soil is going to be very rich in nutrients for plants, so lots of sauropods, which means lots of food, potentially for these guys. Young sauropods, not adult ones. I don't think this guy's going to take on a 15-meter long, 10-ton Isosaurus, but babies definitely. And it's actually thought that a lot of these eggs were, because of sauropods, would come here to incubate them in the volcanic soil, to keep it a bit warmer. So that's quite cool. Several dinosaurs have been found, as I mentioned, Titanosaurus, Isosaurus, the Noasaurid Levajucus has also been found here as well. And it's actually believed that these Deccan traps may have contributed to the extinction of the dinosaurs, as they became active around 350,000 years before the Deccan traps. So that's quite interesting as well. But yeah, really, really cool. Another cool species by Netraptor, Always winning, Netraptor is. So let them run off and do their thing. And then we'll look at Smilodon, everyone's favourite. Let's have a look at Smilodon. Let's see if we can find... I don't think we got the best luck with the colours, but we'll have a look at this one, because you can see this very much looks like the Camp Cretaceous one. Everyone's kind of been asking for Smilodon since it was in Camp Cretaceous. But here we've got a Smilodon finally from Jasurba. Jasurba makes always these funky mods. So Smilodon itself is an extinct group of felids. If you watched the video yesterday, we had another saber-toothed cat, so a lot of that information applies here. But there's one of the best-known saber-toothed predators and prehistoric mammals. It's kind of up there. It's like the T-Rex of mammals. Although it's commonly referred to as a saber-toothed tiger, it's not actually closely related to tigers. It's in its own group of saber-toothed cats called the Machaerodontids. The estimated divergent date between these two groups about 20 million years. Smilodon was one of the last surviving species, or last surviving genera of these saber-toothed cats, along with Homotherium. Living right up to the end of the Pleistocene and into the Holocene, about 11,000 to 9,000 years ago, or sometimes even like 8,000 years ago is considered the youngest. And there are 3 different known species. There's Gracilis, Fatalis, and Populata. I covered Populata quite a bit in the last episode with the southern saber-tooth, but there's not too much difference between them. Overall, though, they were all very robustly built cats, much more than any other living species of cat, with well-developed forelimbs and exceptionally long canines, and the jaw had a big gape of that of modern cats, and its upper canines were slender and fragile, which were adapted for precision killing. So the smallest species was S. gracilis, which is smallest, but also the oldest. It was about 55 to 100 kilograms in weight, so about the same size as jaguar. Fatalis was a little bit bigger, between 160 to 280 kilograms, and a height of 100 centimeters, so about the size of a large tiger. But then and both of these species are mainly known from North America, but remains of South America have been attributed to Fatalis. And then you had S. populata from South America, which was the largest species, ranged from 220 to 436 kilograms in weight and 120 centimeters at the shoulder height, was among the, if not the largest known velid of all time. And the coats are not really known from Smilodon. They're believed to have spots, potentially rosettes. But this is, based off the Camp Cretaceous one, which is not meant to be extremely scientifically accurate. It's supposed to chase around little kids in a cartoon, so I'm not too worried about that. In terms of its prey and what it was doing, they would have lived in a time with lots of megafauna, so these guys would have been hunting large things like bisons, camels, ground sloths, macrauchenias, and things like that. And they were thought to have killed their prey by holding it down with its forelimbs, holding it still, and then biting it on the neck to basically kill them quickly and swiftly, so they'd be able to kill them quickly, biting the jugular and the windpipe to just suffocate it and make it bleed out. But there's a lot of debate on the species. We do have thousands and thousands of specimens from the La Brea tar pits and other places around America, the Americas. So there's a lot that you can talk about with this guy, and they're very interesting to study. But there's lots of debate on whether they were social animals or solitary. There's some evidence to suggest they were social because they have injuries that have healed up. That they wouldn't be able to hunt, with this kind of injury, but they healed from it. So they seem that they could have been social to some extent. Looking at analysis and the remains and things like that. They also, potentially different species had different habitat preferences. So Fatalis seemed to have preferred closed habitats because it had to compete, with American lions and direwolves that lived in more open habitats. So that's kind of niche partitioning there. Populatar, which wasn't quite so much competition in South America, so they managed to get bigger and live in the open plains. In areas where they did overlap, Fatalis and Populatar, they seem to have niche petition like that. Fatalis living in more closed habitats, Populatar living in more open habitats. That's really cool. But they died out with a lot of the megafauna at the end of the Ice Age, the Pleistocene extinction event between 13,000 and 9,000 years ago. Along with so many other different species of large animal, or not even large animals, lots of different species died during this time. We don't know why. A lot of people think it potentially would have been climate change or humans or some mix of the factor, potentially disease. Its reliance on large animals has been proposed to be a really big issue as well, since these guys were specialized to large species, so they had to kill big things. Like a single Populatar could have killed an animal up to about 3 tons. So it could have, they were specialized in very large prey, and once that very large prey goes extinct, they go extinct. So that kind of makes sense there. But yeah, it's a big debate what's happened exactly. But yeah, another really cool mod. You do love Smilodon. Nice to see. I'd love to see a Camp Cretaceous skin, or even in Jurassic World Evolution 3. I hope to add Smilodon just to add that little bit of completion. I think they should really focus on the next few games. I'm going to do a speculation video. I'm thinking about it. I'm going to wait maybe until the actual movie comes out and then do some speculation and things like that. And I think they should try and just complete the roster a bit of the main media, so you can get everything from the main media of Jurassic Park and Jurassic World, since you have Camp Cretaceous and Rebirth and things like that, and Chaos Theory as well. So that's what I think they should focus on. But yeah, really awesome mod. So yeah, Jashuba did a really nice job. So yeah, we're going to let them run off and do their thing. So yeah, I'm going to thank everyone. Thank you, NetRaptor. You did a great job with all those mods. Haswag Tree, Jojo Chess, and Jashuba, you've all done really great jobs with these mods. Really like to see them coming around, and looks really, really awesome. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you guys like and subscribe, always remember to click little bell icons to get notified of anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, if you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.